We'll give it up for Michelle and Sarah and Steve and Kirk again. Took me back to 1968. Beautiful stuff. Well, we all know, obviously, that today's Super Bowl is a rematch of the Super Bowl 2 years ago, Super Bowl in 2023. And that was a tight one 2 years ago. We just beat them by 3 points. Last year was tight, 3 points. I'm just ready for a blowout on the Chiefs side tonight. In 2023, the week before the game, there's all kinds of interviews, and Andy Reid was asked a question, what if he drank coffee? And his answer was probably one of his better answers throughout that week. He said this about drinking coffee: "No, I got endless energy for a chubby guy. I just get up and go." Do y'all, anybody here know who played in the very first Super Bowl, January 15, 1967? Chiefs and Packers. You're good. I wish I had a Snickers bar for you, John. It was not a good day for the Chiefs. We got blown out that time by a score of 35-10. Well, we all know Vince Lombardi. He's the one that they named the Super Bowl trophy after, the Lombardi Trophy, and he was the coach of the Packers. He used to tell his players that these were his priorities: God, family, and the Green Bay Packers. And his players said that he often turned those values upside down. Well, at last year's Super Bowl, Andy Reid was asked about his values. And there are 3 things that Coach Reid values, and surprisingly, cheeseburgers is not one of them. Andy Reid's values are these, he says: if I'm not doing football or family, then I'm not doing anything. I'm not a golfer, I don't go fishing or all that stuff. It's either family or football or church. So in a way, you've got these 2 really, both Hall of Fame coaches. Lombardi's already there, and Andy Reid will be, but just icons in the game. They share very similar values with their religion, with their football, and with their families. But we saw last week that there is maybe Lombardi and Reid, but there won't be Jesus in that group. He doesn't really share the same values that they have. We looked at this passage last week. Then Jesus' mother and brothers arrived. Standing outside, they sent someone in to call him, and the crowd was sitting around Jesus. And they told him, "Hey, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you." And the expectation was that Jesus would turn his back on the crowd and do what he was supposed to do, what good boys were supposed to do, and go talk to his mom, go talk to his brothers. Jesus didn't do that. "Who are my mothers and my brothers?" he asked. Then he looked at this group that was sitting there in the circle, and he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." So we talked last week about sometimes, and it's okay, our chosen family is more valuable, more important, a higher priority than our birth family. We have a hard time with what Jesus said in that situation. And Jesus said a lot of things along that very same line when he's in a situation in which he has an opportunity to talk about the family. A couple of weeks ago, our vice president made a comment, and I don't really like to use political figures in a public way like this, but when he brings in Christianity to it, I almost feel like, well, that's something that I probably want to and need to address. And this is what Vance said: there is a Christian concept that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens. And then after that, prioritize the rest of the world. And a lot of the far left has completely inverted that. So he introduces this philosophy by saying it's a Christian concept. Now, granted, some Christians hold to that concept. But I've got to ask myself, Is it really a Christ concept? Is it something that the Christ in Jesus actually expressed? Yeah, some Christians all the way back to I guess Augustine did. Talked a little bit about that. Aquinas talked a little bit about that. But I don't know if that reflects Jesus or not. So there's some debate about whether or not that's a Christian concept. What if, just let me give you another way of looking at things. What if instead of a hierarchy in which God is at the top of the pile type of way of thinking, what if God is in everything and everything is in God? Well, if that's true, then the lay of the land is completely different. The lay of the land is not either this or that. The lay of the land is both this and that. So the answer to the question, which is more important, God or family, my country or the world, is yes. They're all important, and it could be that they're equally important because God is in everything. There was a time, I mentioned a moment ago, that there were other times in which Jesus was confronted with issues about the family, and he went against the culture. One time a guy came up and said, Jesus, I'd really like to follow you, but my dad just died. I got to go make some funeral arrangements. How would you have responded to the guy? Well, of course, go make funeral arrangements. This is your dad. This is where you need to be. But you know what Jesus did? Let the dead bury the dead. Wow. Jesus would not be invited to any evangelical family conference. And so I can't help but read all of these. There's probably 6 to 8 places in Jesus' life where he just went totally counterculture to what the family was all about. And I've got to think about that. Why, Jesus, was this such a deal for you? Well, maybe Jesus' provocative, and they really are provocative statements about the family, are meant to show us that when we include God just as one object in a list of objects, we're kind of missing the point. If I have to choose between God and my family, God and my job, my love of my country, or my love of the world, then for me personally, and it may not be where you are, but where I am personally, my spirituality, my understanding of faith challenges me to find, it challenges me to a new way of seeing that God in my family, God in my job, God in my country, God in my world, and to love all of it equally and all of it as one. In these very challenging, as Whitney Hart, with her heartfelt story, reminded us these are challenging and difficult times. And I want to ask you that if it's possible in these times, that we can get to the point where we see that we are all connected. And that you, not part of my birth family, is just as important as my birth family. And for some of us, the chosen family is more helpful than our birth family. And so this realization that we are all connected is kind of what we're talking about in this series on families. And today I want to focus on this, family conflict. Can the idea that we are all connected maybe help reduce some of this family conflict, if not solve it? Sometimes we can't solve it. Paul says if it's possible, be at peace, but it may not be possible. But maybe it can change at least. If we can't be reconciled with someone, maybe we can just stop hating them. And maybe we don't have to carry the grudge anymore. Maybe we don't have to just be angry with them all the time. So what do we do with family conflict? We all have it. Denise and I have it, and we've got a pretty doggone good marriage. And we have conflict. But sometimes in marriage, conflict can sadly lead to a divorce. Divorce is one of the most painful life events, but sometimes it is the only path to peace, an only way to happiness. Writer Jennifer Weiner says, divorce is not such a tragedy. A tragedy is staying in an unhappy marriage. Divorce is hard. But staying in a toxic relationship, I think, is even harder. And maybe sometimes the only way to heal is to let go. Tim Keller is one of my favorite authors. He died 2 years ago, and he was evangelical. And even in my deconstruction days when they started, Tim Keller helped me bridge from a very fundamentalist evangelicalism to a more progressive evangelicalism. And Tim Keller is so wise, and this good evangelical person, he was pastor in New York City, said this about divorce. Divorce is not to be done lightly, but it sometimes is the right and only thing to do. Tim Keller talks about divorce as being an amputation, and he got that idea from the word asunder. It's old King James Version in Matthew 19 where Jesus is teaching, and he says, whatever God has put together, let no man put asunder. And one of the ways to look at that word is to amputate, because it literally means to cut off. And so what does Keller mean by that? Well, the only reason that somebody has to have a limb amputated is because it's either the limb or the life. We cut off the limb to save the life. And Keller, I think, was saying, sometimes you have to cut off your marriage partner to save your life. And Jesus says the reason that happens is the hardness of our heart, because maybe our mate is just really acting in unloving ways, over and over, unloving. And sometimes it's just better to amputate it in order to save your soul, save your life. Yeah, divorce is sometimes necessary, just like amputation. Now, growing up in the church world, as Denise and I did, divorce was just about the worst thing you could ever do. You can murder your spouse, and you'd be welcome in church the next Sunday. But if you divorced your spouse, you would be shunned. Sometimes churches would overtly ask you to leave. Other times you would just be made to feel so miserable, pressured out. But if you're divorced and if you've got trauma over how churches have treated you in the past, did you know that God divorced the nation of Israel? God says through the prophet Jeremiah, I gave faithless Israel her certificate of divorce and sent her away because of all of her adulteries. And yet I saw that her unfaithful sister Judah had no fear. She also went out and committed adultery. Yeah, if you're divorced, you're in pretty good company. God was even divorced. Now God got back together. Yeah. But it sure does take the sting out of, and the stigma out of that divorce. Now, we all try to avoid amputation if we possibly can. And I think we should try to avoid divorce, but sometimes it's absolutely necessary. People look at Denise and me as a couple, and they look at me, then they look at Denise, then they look back at me with this expression like, how in the world did you get her to marry you? And so we talk about, when did you all get married? 1980. 1980? How did you do it? You all look like you're kind of happy too. And so, especially with new couples that I'm going to marry, officiate at their wedding, They often ask, okay, how did you do this 44 years? And how did you do it in a way that you love each other, you have fun with each other? So to avoid the conflict in marriage, in a relationship of commitment, here are some things that Denise and I did. We chose to love every day. Feelings come and go, but love is a choice you make daily. Marriage is all full of choices. Really, marriage is just two people saying, what do you want for dinner? Somebody please make a decision. So even in the mundane things of life, just love each other. Choose love every day. Second thing that we did not always do, our first decade, maybe even longer of marriage, it was a very patriarchal, almost misogynistic marriage. And I was the head, and she was to wait on me, hand and foot, and all that kind of stuff. And then in part of my theological deconstruction, it also affected my relationship deconstruction. And I began to change a lot of things about our marriage as my theology began to change. And one thing we began to practice is active listening. A lot of people complain that their partners just do not listen. I never heard Denise say that. She may have. I just don't know. But one of the tools that we were taught is active listening. And that when we're in the middle of a discussion, especially a disagreement, to ask questions. So there was one time that we were in a heated disagreement. And so instead of giving her my advice and telling her, instead of saying what I thought ought to be done, I wanted to practice active listening. I wanted to practice asking questions. And so I asked a question in the middle of our disagreement. I said, Nisi, why are you acting so psycho right now? Not necessarily the right question to ask, but active listening. We had to learn to respect each other's differences. We are so compatible. There's not a lot of difference between us, but there are some significant ones. She is a fix-it person. I am a break-it person, so it's a very good match. I cannot fix a thing. She can fix everything. And she has one way to empty the dishwasher the right way, and I have another way of emptying the dishwasher. And I had to learn to respect the fact that, yeah, her way really is better, but she had to respect the fact that my way is not as good, but it is my way. And she might respect that. It's still an issue. Efficiency, that's right. I'd like to leave plenty of space between the dishes. Yeah, so they get clean. Exactly. And we had to realize we married a person. We did not marry a clone. So respect those differences. We also, this has been the very beginning of our relationship, 1980. Never stop dating. Keep those romantic moments alive, even if it's just pizza on the couch. We're at the age now that if we want to keep romance alive, something better happen before 9 o'clock or we're both asleep. It's just romance kind of gets tired around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And then forgive quickly. Let go of grudges. No one wins when bitterness lingers. We were both raised on this passage in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Paul writes, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. And so we paraphrase that to say, don't go to bed angry. So we were taught early in our marriage, don't go to bed angry. And so some people say, don't go to bed angry, stay up and fight. Don't go to bed angry. But sometimes the guy's just got to go to sleep. And so you just go to sleep. And the principle that Paul writes is good, but it's not, don't take it literally. Go to bed angry, just get some rest. And but the idea is forgive quickly and let go of grudges. Support each other's dreams. Be each other's biggest fans, not each other's biggest critics. Be kind even when you're mad. Yeah, we can even get angry and we can be disagreement, but being kind to each other has been like number one goal, number one rule in our house. And I don't think we've ever not been kind to each other. We've been mad at each other, but I don't think we were ever unkind to each other. And then work as a team. Marriage is not 50-50. It's not 60-40. It's 100-100. We each give it our all. We don't divide. This is your job. This is my job. If the job needs to be done, one of us will do it. It's 100-100. And then this is something we learned just within the last few years, rather. Father Rohr helped us with this, and Rumi, that Islamic mystic whom I love, taught us this, to seek divine love within human love. They taught us to see love as this cosmic force that unites us with the divine. And so whether or not you're a Christian, whether or not you're religious, it doesn't really matter. You could be an agnostic or an atheist. But if you have a committed love for anyone, then I think you're experiencing something bigger than yourself, something in the universe. And you can call it God, you can call it love. But it's just something bigger than you, and that can be experienced in a human love. If your relationship in a partnership, especially a marriage, is going through some tough times, call me, call Chris. We would both love to talk with you and listen to you. But if you really want some help, go see a therapist. We will be glad to listen to your story. We will be glad to cry with you. As Whitney said, we will be glad to sit with you and listen to you. But I'm not trained as a therapist, and Chris is not trained as a therapist. So please take advantage of our website's counseling list, and we can guide you to someone who would maybe more accurately, closely fit whatever you're going through. And then we have conflicts with our parents and our kids. Daniel, I'm not going to use any examples today, so my older son is here today. But we have had conflicts with parents and kids. Parent-child relationships are a complete mix of love and frustration, joy and conflict. Comedian Jim Gaffigan kind of lays it out for us. Take a look at this clip. All right. With this principle of being connected to everything, how can that help us with our parent-child conflicts? Stay calm. Be a good bunny rabbit and listen. Listen to your child express their thoughts and their feelings without interruption. Acknowledge their feelings. I see why you feel that way. I see why you're thinking that. Use I statements instead of accusations. Daniel, I feel disrespected. I did use you, didn't I? Child, I did feel disrespected when you ignore me like that. Instead of saying, you never listen to me. Just use I statements. Find the root of the problem. If your child may be hungry, your child may be tired, your child may feel overwhelmed, maybe there's some underlying issues with your child and they're acting out. Maybe they're feeling unheard. Maybe they're experiencing some pain at school. Maybe they're just seeking some independence. That's why we raise our kids, to be independent. Then work toward a solution together. How can we fix this? You want to clean up your room before dinner or after dinner? And then model the behavior you want to see. If you want your kids to respect you, then respect them. Apologize when you're wrong. They will learn the importance of apologizing and humility. Pick your battle. Mismatched socks, not a battle. A bad hairstyle, not a battle. That was my dad's biggest battle with me. It was such an issue. It's not a battle. Take a break if you need to. Teach your child that it's okay to pause before responding. In fact, when we get angry, something happens in our brain, and we're not quite as able to think creatively. So if we react in anger, we're not really using our whole brain power to think of a really affirming solution. And always end with love and reconnection. A hug, a kind word, quality time, even when we disagree. I totally love you. Dr. King on Christmas sermon, I think in 1967, included this statement in his message. Now, let me suggest first that if we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional, wide rather than narrow. We must develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And as long as we try, the more we are going to have war in this world. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. That's good. 1910, Halifax County, Virginia, finally got the Confederate statue they've been wanting. They set it up on a pedestal. They're going to have a big dedication ceremony. But one of the committee members looked at the statue a little bit closer and said, "Hey, y'all, this is a Yankee, not a Confederate." So the company in Massachusetts that made the statue makes their Confederate statues and their Yankee Union statues out of the same mold. They just decorate one a little bit different, put something different on the belt buckle, change the hat a little bit. So they realized they had a Yankee rather than a rebel, a Union instead of a Confederate. So they told the company sent them a Confederate back, and this community kept the Yankee one, and it's in a museum. But that's a good metaphor for us today. No matter what side we're on, Republican or Democrat, this or that, Chiefs, Eagles, whatever. We're all cut from the same mold. And maybe if you and I realize that the master designer, through theistic evolution or whatever, created us all as one, and in each one of us is the image of God. Maybe if we approach a conflict, whether it's with a family member, a friend, or in society, maybe approaching each other, that we are shared humanity, can help move the conflict resolution alone. So tonight at bars across Springfield and in Kansas City, there are going to be a lot of people, and we all have something in common. We want the Chiefs to win. At the bar, there may be a person that voted for Trump sitting beside a person that voted for Harris. And more than likely, maybe not 100%, but more than likely, those two individuals are going to focus on one thing: go Chiefs. And all I'm wanting us to learn, maybe through the Super Bowl tonight, 120 million of us are going to watch that in the country. Is it possible that as the Super Bowl kind of unites us, it kind of helps us not focus on the differences? Is there our shared humanity and the presence of the divine within all of us that can maybe help us at least live peaceably with those with whom we differ? I hope so.